MedBricks on the screen, healthcare in between. Physics, art, and math got us down this path. Historical tales come alive, where science and stories dive. Blended facts with heart, knowledge from the start. MedBricks blues we sing, to the future memory. Health and science in the mix, MedBricks got the fix. Complex subjects made clear, every episode cheer. Ramona leads the way, explaining day by day. In the world of digital streams, turning knowledge into dreams. Through the tales of old, new stories unfold.
MedBricks Webcast is a new kind of healthcare media channel to break the silo mentality and foster interdisciplinary thinking. Our mission is to fill that gap and to create a curiosity through different lenses, tapping the passion that guided the historical figures in medicine and bringing present-day groundbreaking research to the front lines. We interview physicians and leaders in the industry about present-day healthcare challenges on our live programming. Hey, welcome to the MedBricks Webcast. This is Raman Raju. Sorry, I'm under the little bit weather. Here, I traveled quite a bit and I came back and a little bit under the weather. Bear with me. So, but I have a very good program, exciting program. A lot of doctors wanted to know how to invest, like in the Silicon Valley way. Silicon Valley has a different method. There's the traditional investments. They don't go through the traditional investment process. So there is no other better person than our attorney, that is Silicon Valley veteran attorney, Roger Royse, is a good friend of mine, and he's doing a lot of these sessions with me. So I think he's a frequent guest of my podcast, and he's going to talk about the new instrument in the Silicon Valley, how it works, and then he's also a tax attorney. So you can talk about a little bit of tax ramifications or tax benefits, and what are the things that you cannot cover through this process. So yeah, without further ado, let me introduce you, Roger Royse, from Silicon Valley, from Palo Alto. He's joining with us. Roger, welcome to the podcast.
Okay, thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah, we changed the new music for you. It'll wake you up a little bit. So, Roger, tell us a little bit about your background. If what is your practice? A little bit about your practice.
Be happy to. So, I'm a lawyer. I'm a partner with the law firm of Haynes Boone. I practice in downtown Palo Alto, Silicon Valley. I do emerging growth and venture capital. That's formations, financings, and M&A transactions. And I work mostly with tech companies, usually on the company side, not very often on the investor side, but usually on the company side. And I work with all sorts of companies in tech, but primarily three big areas in my practice. One is agriculture technology. The second is biotech, or we'll call it medical tech, precision medicine. And then the third is energy tech, or what's also known as climate tech. But generally, it's just all tech, all different kinds of tech.
That we are right now focused on healthcare tech. That's where our podcast is focused on. Let us talk about a little bit about. I get a lot of inquiries about the doctors calling. My nephew who is trying to start a company. My brother-in-law is starting a company. All these things, they want to invest. What are the processes that involves to do the real right way to do it with this kind of investment in the Silicon Valley way? Could you please tell us what are the things available
for the doctors to invest with the family, first in the family, then say the friends, family and friends.
Friends and family around? Well, yeah, and that might be a good place to start.
Okay.
Is with investments that your physician audience might be asked to make in companies. And by the way, when I run into doctors in my practice, it's either because they're an angel investor or because they've had a really good idea that they want to spin off. So let's start with the angel investor side. Um, and you said, family investment. So that's more like a very early stage. And it's the typical evolution of a startup company is, to go all the way from concept to IPO or exit. It'll start with a founder with an idea, and they need to get to the point where they do what we call proof of concept. They need to prove that their idea actually has merit, and that might be a prototype. Who knows? It could be a lot of different things. They don't have to have revenue. They just have to prove that what they have is something that actually could turn into a business at some point. Now, typically, the founder is going to have to fund the initial costs out of their own pocket. And it's not a lot, but it just kind of gets them to the point where they can start looking for money to build a prototype. And until they can actually get to that proof of concept, they're not going to be able to attract outside investors. It's going to be very difficult. So instead, they'll go to their friends and their family, and they'll say, hey, I've spun up a company. I've got this idea. I got a pitch deck. I may have gotten a little bit of progress on this, but I need some money to build the beta or to build the prototype or to do whatever it is to get it to the point where I can take it to the next group of investors and actually ask them to, say, look, I've proven that it works. Can you fund it? So now we can go into the market and get what we call traction, generate some revenue. So you probably, if you're a physician, if you're a physician in Silicon Valley, you've probably already been contacted by family members saying, hey, can you toss $25,000, $50,000 into this pool, and let's see if we can, see if you can turn my idea into a beta. So that's usually the first step. And I'll keep talking if you want me to, but
Please keep talking. Yeah, please keep talking.
all right. So then the question is,
I have a little bit of a, please keep talking, whatever you want to say.
Well,
please.
Then the question is, well, what are we going to buy for that money, right? What do I get for that? What is the security that's being offered? And that's where we go back to your introduction. Almost always, here in Palo Alto, where I practice, almost always that instrument is going to be what we call a SAFE, a simple agreement for future equity. And there was a time when instead they would buy convertible notes. That would be a note, a promissory note, like a debt that converts into equity down the road. And in the old days, the way that worked is the investor would come along with a relatively small amount of money. The company is so early, they've got no revenue, they've got no headcount, they don't have any intellectual property registrations. So it's super hard to value them. And, the founder doesn't really want to commit to a valuation because they might choose a number that's too low. The investor doesn't really want to because they might choose a number that's too high. So we would defer that decision by having the investor loan the money to the company with the understanding that that loan would convert into equity at a little better price than what you sell stock to the first institutional professional investor. That's a venture capitalist, right? So now the angel doesn't have to do all, they're piggybacking on the diligence and the work and the expertise of the professional investor in terms of value, not only valuation, but the terms of the stock that they're getting. So they're going to get preferred stock down the road. And that's, sorry?
Roger, yeah. So most of the physicians or the angel investors, basically, that's where the classification is. If I put the classification for them, they are not going to be VCs. They are going to be angel investors, supporting their idea or their friend's idea or their somebody's idea. They're supporting it, basically.
Understood. So we used to do convertible notes, and that way the angel investor can get their money in the company. The company can get the money. the angel investor can be assured they're going to get a good deal on this because their promissory note is going to convert at a discount. So for example, if they put $80 into the company, they're going to get $100 worth of stock when the company actually sells stock. They just piggyback and participate in the round. Now, there were two problems with that. One is that debt has to pay interest, and or it's imputed under the tax rules. And the investors are not really looking for a debt return. They're not looking for interest. They're looking, first of all, they're probably just trying to help out the company. But to the extent they get a return, it's got to be an equity return, which is outsized. It's much, much bigger than a debt return because they're taking an outsized risk. They're taking an equity risk, right? There's, no one, those notes rarely get repaid. The only time that does happen is if the company does a further financing and the investor has the option to just take their money back. And then they rarely will because they just, unless they've lost faith in the company. So those were the problems with the notes. So to solve those problems, Silicon Valley came up with the SAFE, the Simple Agreement for Future Equity, which is just like a convertible note. The idea is you give me the money now and I will give you stock later at this discounted price, but it's not debt, so it's not going to have an interest component and it's not going to have a fixed date of repayment. And if I don't do a financing or if we don't sell the company, then you don't get paid. But if we do, then you get that equity-sized return. And that is how most angels invest now. Their money goes in exchange for a SAFE.
So SAFE is an instrument, financial instrument for doctors. If I ask you a question that if the doctors want to use a SAFE instrument, they want to put say $50,000, they want to put $25,000, something like that. So they give a promissory note. The company gives a promissory note. That's what he said.
That's how we used to do it. He used to give them a convertible note. Now the company will sign and deliver a simple agreement for future equity instead.
Okay. So what is the valuation of that? What is no, let me bring you there.
Well, see, that's the beauty of it. You don't have to set a valuation. You're deferring that decision until down the road when the SAFE converts to stock. And that's going to happen as part of what we call a priced round because it's actually you're valuing the company. But it's going to be later after the company has some metrics and can be valued.
So SAFE note is one of the ways to proceed with the initial investment with the family and friends, right?
Right.
What is it? What is the difference between so they don't know. They said that 20% of the stock value they can give an additional 20% less than stock value they offer later on. But how do they know the valuation at the time? They don't know the valuation of the company, right?
No, you don't. See, that's the thing. You're saying that you're going to get stock at 80% of the price. 20% is a pretty standard discount. And you're saying because you got in early, we're going to convert this to stock, and your SAFE, whatever amount you invested in the company, is going to buy stock at 80% of the price that we sell to the investor. That's a 20% discount. Okay. That's what we mean by that.
Okay, so there is no fixed amount. They are just saying that 20% discount you get. That's basically that's what they're saying.
But we will almost always these days set a valuation cap, because if you think of that scenario, just think what might happen. The company might use the investor's money to build up quite a lot of value. And we're seeing that a lot these days in artificial intelligence. Those companies are going from 0 to 100 really fast, super fast. And then the investor is going to say, well, wait a minute, you used my money to build all this value, and I'm working against myself because I'm investing at the value that you build later, that you built with my money. So we now have valuation caps and say, look, no matter what happens, I'm going to invest at no greater than X valuation, meaning that I'm going to get some minimum percentage of your company for the amount of money that I give to you now. So let's say we have a $10 million valuation cap, which is really common. And then the company does a financing at a $20 million valuation. Well, you're not getting your stock at that later financing value. You're going to get your stock at the $10 million cap. So you get twice as much as you would have if you waited and invested, later.
Yeah. So second, you're saying that there's we get the money and then do the process go through. When is there any time period? Is it like 2 years, 3 years? Is there any time period is established in this process?
Any time period? No, I
Yeah,
mean,
safe to note.
as a rule of thumb, you want to see your company out there in the angel round. You want to. My rule of thumb is raise enough money to double your value in 1 year, and that's broad. So sometimes it takes 2 years, and sometimes you don't quite double the valuation, but that's where we start. And but there's no hard and fast rule. I've got companies out there that have safes for many, many years, 10 years.
Oh
They
my God.
just haven't been able to, do the price round. And they just live off safe money their whole existence, which is not a great solution for anyone except the company, maybe. Yes, but no hard and fast rule.
Okay.
That's just generally a rule of thumb.
Doctors invest a lot of money in the end of the year because they get a tax benefits, Roger. So, what are the tax benefits for them? Any tax benefits that there for investing in a Silicon Valley companies?
Well, not really. I mean, there was a time many years ago when they might have invested in a pass-through entity, like a limited liability company taxed as a partnership, or maybe even an S corp, and they might have been able to get some deductions that flow through to them. Subject to all sorts of tax rules, at risk, passive loss, etc., basis limitations. There's so many limitations well, first of all, that structure is pretty much gone. Almost all the companies I form these days are what we call C corporations. And that's an ordinary state law corporation that is taxed under subchapter C of the Internal Revenue Code, meaning that it pays its own tax as a separate tax-paying entity on its own income. And the reason we do that is for a number of reasons. The biggest reason is because, again, this only succeeds usually if you get a venture capitalist interested in you down the road. And C Corps are all that they will invest in. I mean, you might find an odd fund, owned by one person somewhere that might do something different. But as a general rule, that's all they'll invest in. So companies will start that way or convert that way fairly quickly. Now, the other big reason is something called qualified small business stock. And if you got a few minutes, I'd like to talk to you about this because this
Please.
is huge.
Yeah.
Now, qualified, if a holder of qualified small business stock sells that stock at a gain, they can exclude up to the greater of $10 million or 10 times their cost basis from federal income tax. Okay, let me say that again. The gain on the sale of qualified small business stock can be excluded from federal income tax, zero income tax, federal income tax, up to the greater of $10 million or 10 times their cost basis. So so how do we get that benefit? Well, one, it's got to be stock issued by a C Corp. That corp has to be in a qualified trade or business, which is almost anything other than services, like a lawyer couldn't be a qualified trade or business. The stock has to be held for 5 years, and the company has to have less than $50 million of assets on a tax basis when the stock is issued. Or they have to meet the test when the stock is issued. So if they ever do have 50 million, then the company can never issue QSBS after that. So this is a huge benefit. Now, unfortunately, not all the states conform. As you might expect, if you're unlucky enough to live here in California, you don't get this benefit. California is going to tax you. We don't conform to the federal qualified small business stock requirement. But some states do, and some states don't even have a tax. And so you could end up paying a zero federal or state tax on your income from gains on the sale of this if it meets all these requirements and you hold it 5 years before you sell. And, foundationally, the first thing is that it's got to be a C Corp. So that's another reason that's why almost every company I form is as a C Corp these days.
So if you form already LLC, can you convert them into C corporation later on?
Yeah, we do that all the time. And the reason we would do that is if we've got let's say we've got a company that we don't know that we're a candidate for venture financing. And right now, we've got a pretty good tax environment for pass-through entities that's scheduled to go away in a year, but it might not under our 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So you might say, I kind of like paying this low rate of tax on my pass-through income, or I might like taking the deductions against my personal return. So I'm going to be an LLC because I can get a pass-through. See, an LLC, the income and loss of the entity passes through to the owners. And there's only one level of tax on all that income. So a company, if they're never going to take venture capital and they're never going to sell, and they're just going to be a company that is a cash cow and throws off profits, like a consulting company, for example, for many, many years, well, then it ought to be an LLC. On the other hand, if it's the kind of tech company I deal with, where they're going to build something really big and bad and valuable and lose a lot of money doing it, and then finally sell it for a lot of money for a big gain on the back end, well, that's possibly venture financeable. So that's a C Corp. So sometimes we get a company and they're saying, we could go either way. We could be profitable and we could have a nice business that we'll just keep. Or we could end up, being something that's scalable that the VCs would be interested in or other investors. So we'll want to give them QSBS. So we'll start as an LLC and kick the can down the road, see how things go. And if it turns out that, what do you know, we're scalable and we've got investors circling wanting to invest in us, then they can incorporate and then they can issue qualified small business stock to the investors and anyone else who gets stock in the deal.
So
So
let us talk. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just saying it's a strategy. It's a planning strategy.
Sorry about this, my cough. Let us talk about the entrepreneur company side of it. If I want to, suppose company like me or somebody else like me, want to raise the money with the 10, 20, 30 doctors, $25,000 each, what is the strategy that we should adopt? People like me or somebody else like me should adopt to raise the capital.
Well, step number one, form a company. You don't want to do anything without a company, and you want to do that as soon as possible. So for a couple of reasons. So you can gather intellectual property inside a vehicle. And number two, you've got a vehicle that can divide up equity among founders and other stakeholders. And three, that can enter into contracts with various parties. So and limit liabilities. And by the way, that's why we have companies. People sometimes don't even talk about that because it's like, oh, it goes without saying. I'm going to say it anyway. The reason we have companies is to limit liability, especially in a space that's medical related. You can imagine how big the liability can be. So we want to form a company. Like I say, most of the companies I form are corporations because we plan on getting big, hopefully really quickly. And we plan on selling securities fairly quickly. So we'll form a corporation. Now, for that first money, see, it's way different. Like you said, VCs and angels operate way differently. An angel is expecting you to tell them what it is you're offering. And you're offering a safe, and you should have a standard form safe, and it should look very much like all the standard forms out there, so nobody spends a lot of money negotiating it. And you'll give that document to to the investor, and hopefully everybody can sign it and fund. VCs are much different. The VC is going to tell you what they want to buy and use. Yeah. They're going to give you a term sheet with a bunch of different terms. And that's a very expensive, drawn out process. It just always is because it's a negotiated transaction. But the early money, we don't want to spend a lot of legal fees negotiating, so we'll use a standard safe.
Physicians are automatically accredited investors, or you have to do accreditation of individuals? What is the rule of the physician asking for investment from a physician? Is there any automatically all physicians are automatically accredited because of their education?
Well, not necessarily. No, the accreditation is a net worth and net income test. It's one or the other. And it's a test that was set in 1933, but it's only changed a little bit 10 years ago. Anyway, the test is that And what you're talking, let's take a step back about what accredited means. So whenever you sell securities and when a company issues a safe to an investor, it is selling a security. And every sale of securities, either has to be registered or exempt. Okay, registered means like a public offering. We're not doing that. So it has to be exempt from registration. The exemption we most often rely on is under Rule 506 B or C, which relate to sales to accredited investors. Now, what is an accredited investor? It's, in the case of an individual like your angels, it's somebody who has either $1 million of net worth excluding their personal residence, or number two, they have an annual income requirement of $200,000 a year for the current year and the past 2 years, or $300,000 when you include them and their spouse. Okay, so I think for most physicians, that's a relatively low bar, and they should be able to meet that. And the company just has to reasonably believe that the person is accredited. Now, some companies, they make a big mistake because that's a private offering exemption. And some companies will go out and start advertising what they're doing. They'll put it on social media, they'll tell everybody in the world, they'll put it on their website, hey, we're raising money. If they do a public solicitation of the sale of their securities, well, they're not done. There was a time when that's it. You've blown the exemption, forget it. You just go home, stop the company, start over. Now, these days, it's not quite that way. Now it means that they can only take money from accredited investors. They can't even have one non-accredited, and they have to verify. They can't just take the investor's word for it that they're accredited. They have to verify that they actually are. That means they got to look at records, or they got to use a third-party verification service, or they got to get the accountant to send them a letter, something like that. There's a lot of different ways to verify. So, but the important thing to note is just the accredited standard. That's how most deals are done.
So you're saying accredited means that, so you're saying that we can advertise in social media? That's what you're saying?
You can advertise an accredited only offering, but keep in mind what I said. If you do that, two things. Number one, see, if you don't advertise, you can have up to 35 unaccredited investors on your cap table. If you do advertise, you cannot sell stock to even one in that offering. They have to all be accredited. And secondly, you can't take their word for it. These days, we just have a rep, in the documents that say, I promise I'm accredited. And sometimes we go a little further and make investors fill out a questionnaire if we don't know them that well, where they check a box that says I'm accredited because I meet one or both of these two tests, net worth or net income. You can't rely on that if you advertise. If you post it on social media, you've advertised, you've done a public solicitation. So now the law says you have to make darn sure they're accredited. You have to verify.
Oh, interesting. So when you advertise means you have to be very sure that the investors, you have to be very, you need to go to third party verification or some process that you're saying. Yeah. So what is there? Let me introduce you, my good friend, and is a Dr. Jelligam from a cardiologist. Dr. Jelligam, welcome. You are a cardiologist. You know all those up and downs of the investment. Tell us, what are the questions you have for the Silicon Valley veteran guru? Here is Roger Royce. I think I'm getting it wrong here. Let me say that.
Well, good to meet you. Do I get to ask cardiology questions now?
Yeah, he is very good at cardiology.
Yeah. So this has been great discussion so far, Roger and Ramana. It's like I get to peek on the other side because most of the physicians do LLCs, PLLCs, and only some take off to C corps unless they, as you said, like they have this angel investor or venture capitalist. So there are a lot of these new apps coming, as you mentioned earlier, the artificial intelligence, a lot of things are coming in. Doctors are trying to find their groove in those things. since the next few years is going to be a rat race for AI, like everyone is coming up with some app or some kind of platform. What is your take on that in terms of if somebody like me who's interested in AI? How do we get started, or how do we? I mean, Silicon Valley is different pitch, but in general, me sitting in Virginia, what would be the best route for me?
Yeah, well, I'm really glad to have you on the panel, because I also sit on the board of Cancer Patient Lab, and we see lots of companies, startup companies, that are coming up with new and innovative therapies for mostly cancer, but also other diseases sometimes, especially the diagnostic tools. And you're absolutely right. AI is everywhere, and I think it's going to revolutionize really everything. But every one of those companies, when we come talk to them and say, "Gee, what's your go-to-market?" It's oftentimes, well, we have to get into the medical institutions and get adoption by the physicians. And they all tell me that is the most difficult part of this whole process. And I see amazing stuff. I've seen the demos, I've seen what some of these things can do. And it's like, holy cow, why isn't everybody doing this? And they all say, well, there's a lot of resistance. There's physician resistance. Now you have a little bit of an advantage, because you can be an evangelist for your company. You can invest in a company like a lot of the influencers do, right? You listen to the podcast, it's like, oh, this is the greatest supplement ever. And I'm not just saying that, it's not just because I invested in it. I liked it first. That's why I invested. And it's sort of the same thing. I mean, you actually can evaluate the product, you can evaluate the market fit. And as an investor in the company, you become a really valuable investor at that point. You're more than just money, or what we, you're more than money. You're an affinity investor, right? You're the kind of investor that, these companies are definitely going to want to have on their cap table. And by the way, that may likely expand into an advisory role for a lot of companies, especially in cardiology. I've seen some pretty amazing startups doing heart health type products.
So yeah, this advisory boards, I try to be on few, and I see a big disconnect between the physicians and the operational part, clinical and non-clinical, if I have to say. I mean, with all humbleness, big disconnect. I think that's the reason where doctors are a little apprehensive to get into that disruptive zone. I'm one of those few who's willing to take a risk and be that leader of the pack. So I think that's my observation on all these advisory boards.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because again, it's a frustration that I hear constantly from companies, is we just can't get any adoption. We just, we can't get the doctors to use this. And there's some really cool stuff out there. I'm really excited about some of the monitors that go directly, like I have a CGM, and the data goes right to my doctor. He can look at it anytime he wants. He can look at it right now and tell you what my blood sugar is. So it's amazing stuff, I think, and it's going to get better. The AI component to this, as a layman, it just seems to me that what you have to know is just so overwhelming, and the amount of information and how quickly it changes. And, AI feels like a tool that could really enable and help that. But I use Copilot all day long. I talk to it. I talk to Copilot more than my best friend all day long. I talk to it, or ChatGPT. But I would never use it for legal advice. It just wouldn't even occur to me. And I got to believe that doctors are probably the same way. They go home and Google, what movie to go see, but they don't Google, a bunch of symptoms, right?
That is so true. Like, I mean, when I started my own practice here, I used Copilot initially to play. Actually, I learned it from my nephew, and he showed me how to take advantage of that. and that's when I got a peek into Chat GPT as well. But as you said, again, there are so many platforms out there. There are some young physicians who want to get into, and I want to take Ramana's and your help in terms of, hey, how can we form a consortium in terms of if there's an investor or they want to take off of this launch pad, what we are providing in a podcast, some basic, a simple soap note. Hey, as you mentioned earlier, like why C Corp is so important for you on the tech side, similarly on the AI platform side. So I want to really push that, nudge that in my community. And again, this has been a wonderful dialogue, Ramana and Roger, so far.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of opportunity. I think precision medicine is just going to explode in the coming years. Anything medical tech, there's just it feels like a big frontier. There's a lot of opportunity.
So, Roger, that one of the things the doctors, AI, it's a lot of times the AI is a lot of these are things are FDA. There's a lot of regulatory aspects to it. It's not that straightforward. The entrepreneur want to sell everything. One guy came up to me recently and said, "I have a calculation for the cancer treatment. This is the dosage, and you put some kind of a innovative calculations. Maybe right, may not be right, but he thought that he could not have done. He doesn't need FDA regulation." I said that it's impossible. You're talking about patient's dosage. That is, you require. These people, a lot of ignorant. There is a lot of ignorance there in the people, among people that the AI enthusiasts.
Well, regulatory risk is a thing in this space for sure, and the FDA can make or break you. That's for sure, and they're not always all that right or all that accurate. I mean, Theranos had FDA approvals, right? And there are really good therapies out there that I know of that just can't get the approval. There's not enough people. I guess the biggest thing if you're looking at investing in companies that do this stuff, I'm really big on diagnostics because the FDA has approved some diagnostic tools recently. And I think that's something that's going to see rapid approvals. And in fact, I think, there'll come a day when it's not even regulated. So let me give you an example. Multi-cancer early detection devices. So laboratory tests generally, right? As you know, doctor, laboratory tests, they're not a drug. So the FDA typically doesn't regulate them like a drug. But there were proposed regulations recently to say, look, we should include these lab tests in the definition of a drug that we can regulate, or a medical device that we can regulate, because some of them are wrong. And it goes a little bit beyond the mandate that Congress gave us, but we think that it's, lab test as a device. Well, we got a recent Supreme Court case, and this has been litigated in the courts, and people are fighting. There's big lobbying groups. And we got a Supreme Court case called Loper-Bright a few months ago, which basically turned around an old rule on this called the Chevron Doctrine. And the Chevron Doctrine is the idea that courts will defer to regulatory agencies in cases of ambiguity. So a case like this, you might say, well, does the FDA really have the authority to regulate a laboratory test? It's kind of ambiguous. Maybe we'll just defer. Loper-Bright turns that completely around. And they say the court will make the determination as to whether the statute allows that. Now, that might sound like kind of an arcane technical legal point, but I actually think it's going to make a big difference in the space. I think companies that weren't all that fundable, 6 months ago, are all of a sudden a lot more fundable because they've got a path to market they didn't have before, because they never were going to get through, 10 years of FDA trials. They were never going to get to market. So there's been developments in the regulatory side that maybe I should ask ChatGPT which companies this affects I should be investing in, because I think it changes the playing field.
South Korea, for example, is a lot of rapid testing for cancers they use. but we are way behind it actually in this country. We
Oh,
don't have
maybe.
we don't have a lot of rapid testing for cancers. So what do you think, Roger? Just a regulatory point of view and the legal point of view, we this kind of thing, bringing these kind of tests to this country, and you have to go through the whole process, or
Well, I sat down and read those proposed regs, and what I didn't know, and this is why we need people like the good doctor here, because what I didn't know is there's a lot of lab tests out there that just don't work. They're not valuable. They're deceptive, and so we need a doctor to determine which ones are the good ones and which ones aren't. But I'd rather have a doctor tell me that than some bureaucrat at the FDA, to be honest with you. So yeah, so but there are some tests out there that just find just amazing. Just the precision is just amazing.
yeah,
God, I was listening to a podcast this morning and I heard that you can find 1 part per trillion of nanoplastics in tissue and blood, and it's like, how in the world is that even possible? So
one
I
in
think
trillion, one in
1 in a
trillion.
trillion. That's what I heard on the podcast. So there's just something of that magnitude, just teeny tiny, I mean, hardly detectable. So I think the tech is, I couldn't even tell you what the test is, but I just know it's nanoplastics. But anyway, it was a Rhonda Patrick podcast, by the way, if anyone wants to go fact check me. But anyway, the point being is that the tech is getting so good, so good.
Roger, a lot of doctors are skeptical in general. They thought they know about Theranos, what they went through Theranos, that lady. So tell us a little bit about that, why their skepticism, how do you address that part, if they are skeptical
Well, okay, we're getting a little away from legal issues, but I've been in the Valley 30 years. So I've seen a lot of this. And I used to, and it's not really a joke. I used to tell people, that I can spot a liar because people lie to me all day, every day. That's what happens in Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
People have to have this ability to, to this hubris and this incredible belief that they're going to succeed. And what do they call it? A suspension of reality, like Steve Jobs was claimed
yeah,
to have.
delusion.
Yeah, you have to be a little delusional to do this. And they have this saying, fake it till you make it. And everybody knows that. Everyone in the Valley knows there's puffing. Investors know that, right? And that's why you got to ask very specific, pointed questions rather than getting generalized answers. You want very specific answers. And we all kind of accepted that because, look, if you're selling, I don't know, a software widget that helps you find customers faster. Yeah, okay, maybe it doesn't do everything you said, but it someday will. And if it doesn't, no one's going to die, right? Well, then Theranos comes along with this fake it till you make it thing. Well, you know what? People might die, if you lie about that product. So that's number one. And then secondly, that was a case of alleged just out and out fraud, wasn't even puffing. And the difference is, I have a chapter in my book about this, by the way. The difference is, one was a misrepresentation of an actual fact, and that's what you can't do. That's potentially fraud. That's different than just a misrepresentation of what's going to happen in the future. Like, oh, we think, if Theranos had just said, we think we're going to be able to solve this problem in the future, that's different than saying, oh, we've solved this problem, we're in the market, Yeah, let me tell you. So my latest book is called 10,000 Startups, Legal Strategies for Startup Success. And I wrote it during COVID.
Yeah, that's
anyway. And it's out, and it's been published. It's out published since 2022.
So what is in 10,000? You have any healthcare startups there in those 10,000?
Yeah, I got lots of examples. I've got a lot of examples of startups in the book and how companies have pivoted. I got a big chapter on pivoting. I've got a chapter on what happens if things don't go well. Chapters on raising follow-on funding. It's really more of a book for startups, but there's a lot of chapters on investing. But I do have a chapter on angels, and And
Yeah.
what smart
Give me the
angels
link.
do.
I'll put. Yeah, I'll post the link for your book on the podcast anyway.
Okay.
I'm going to do that. Yeah, Roger Roy's website. They can go and buy it. So, Roger, let me ask you a question. Can you hear me?
Yep. Here you find.
Yeah. Roger, the Y Combinator, they have the safe instrument notes. Can we use that one actually for the say for distribute to the doctors if I want to raise money?
Well, keep in mind, Y Combinator is an investor. So obviously, the document they came up with is investor friendly. So you'd want it's what the Y Combinator. I mean, they have other forms, but the one you're talking about is called a post money safe form.
Correct.
And so yeah, so the post money safe basically guarantees you a percentage of the company, regardless of how many other safes they sell. So a company can sell $100,000 worth of safes, or $100 million worth of safes. Your safe is going to convert into the same percentage of the company. That isn't an extremely investor friendly term, because it means the founder takes all the dilution from other safes. Whereas the pre-money safe, which is if I'm a company, I'm going to want you to sign, means everybody takes the dilution, including all the existing safe holders. And post-money is simpler, and that was the justification. And plus, it lets you know what you're going to get. And it might not be a big difference. I mean, if you got a company that's going to go to a price down fairly quickly, no big difference. But if you got companies like I've seen that just live on safe money for years and years, could be a big difference in how much equity the investor gets.
Can you elaborate on that one, Roger, about the
Yeah,
safe
a
a
little bit.
little bit?
So a pre-money safe. Let me say it again. So if you're a company, you want a pre-money safe, and the pre-money safe, it basically says we're going to convert at a certain valuation. And that valuation is going to be based on a price per share, based on a cap table that you have after the conversion of all the safes. So, I know that's the math, but if you work through the math, essentially what it means is that every safe holder is going to get diluted by every other safe holder, along with the founders. It's like you bought stock in a company. You take the same dilution, right? If you buy stock in a company and a company goes out and sells more stock later, well, if you got in before, you get diluted. You went from 10% to 8% now because we sold more stock.
So founders have no special privilege in that sense. You're saying.
No, they're just the founders gets treated the same as the safe holders. You get diluted just like the safe holders.
That is a problem with the Y Combinator safe note.
The Y Combinator is the other way around. Y Combinator says, look, you're going to sell me a safe, and I'm going to get X% of the company at a minimum. And I don't care how many other safes you sell, I still get X%. So let's say you sell, $10 million worth of safes, and if I have a post money safe, doesn't matter. It could be $100 million worth. I still get the same percent. And the reason I say that's investor friendly, because if you think about it, suppose your safe is going to convert into 1% of the company. Well, 1% of a $10 million company is not the same as 1% of a $100 million company. So it's a very investor friendly clause. Oddly enough, it's very widely used. Very widely used.
Everybody is engaged.
Well, the reason why is because it's easy to go online and download it. That's one reason. Secondly, it doesn't make that big a difference because the company's thinking, I'm not going to sell $100 million worth of safes. I'm going to sell a few, and I'm going to do a price round. So let's keep it simple, and I'll give up a percentage point if I have to, just to keep things simple.
So it's not a big problem downloading the Y Combinator safe form.
No, you can use it. If you're an investor, use it. If you're a company, don't use it. I wouldn't if I'm a company, because you don't know. You might go on for many years selling safes, and you don't want to be the only one that gets diluted every time you do.
Okay. So
there's other little things in there. There's pro rata rights. There's representation. There's tax consequences. But that's the really big thing.
Yeah. So let us talk about a little bit of your agriculture conference coming up on October 4th, right, Roger? Tell us about Me and Dr. Jelligam is a cardiologist. We are from the very rural India, so we
Oh,
agriculture based in India. So tell us a little bit. If he is born in but he grew up his mother and we're all from the same area. So tell us agriculture technology. What that's a very interesting for people, particularly from my state. So tell us a little bit about that, Roger. October 4th conference.
we
You're
are
doing.
having our annual, it's our 10th annual Silicon Valley EdTech Conference. The good news is that it's on October 4th. It's a full day in Palo Alto. The bad news is that it's sold out and we've got a wait list. I'm expecting we'll have some people drop out at the end and people will come in on the wait list. I didn't, you never know. I didn't expect it to be quite that popular again this year. We've been doing it for so long. And we have a morning of panels and then an afternoon of companies that are pitching. Yeah, it's interesting. India has become really a place where there's been massive developments in agriculture technology, mostly around water tech and irrigation and data, of course. So we've got companies in our network that are very active in India. Um, in pushing technology out into the field.
So
So
tell us a little bit more about it. What is technology they deploy this kind of agriculture side that is related to Silicon Valley?
yeah, well, the goal here is to minimize the inputs and maximize the outputs, right? Because agriculture is becoming much more of a tech-enabled business, and it was not before. So, for example, let's use a California example. There was a time, and it still happens a lot of places, to go irrigate a grape vineyard. You waste a lot of water, right? A lot of water just gets dumped into the field. Well, there's been tech around for a long time now, because water is kind of a scarce commodity in California sometimes, some years we have droughts, that will actually target that water directly to the plant. So that's one example. But that's kind of old news, the robotics, the precision ag, the giving the plant exactly what it needs, just enough pesticide, just enough herbicide, so you don't ruin the whole field. I think where the future lies is this year, for sure. We're hearing a lot about artificial intelligence and data, and using that data to inform farming decisions. How much fertilizer should I use? How much seed should I lay down? How much water? When should I plant? All these decisions. When you get a big artificial intelligence model that has enough data, it'll tell you the optimal time to do all this stuff. The computer could be your farmer. So AI and data is the big news. And the other thing I'd say that I think is going to be the big news going forward is soil health. Because I've certainly known for a long time that our food and vegetables are not as nutrient packed as they used to be, just because of what over farming has done to the soil.
Oh,
And
really? Mm.
yeah, and even I'm hearing doctors talk about it too on podcasts. I heard Peter Attia do a podcast on this. How he says we're not getting the same nutrients that we used to because of poor soil. Well, awareness is the first step, and tech can solve that problem. Uh, yeah, thank you, doctor. Save the soil movement in India. Uh,
Yeah. In by Sadhguru, that Dr. Our spiritual leader in India.
yep, I know who he is. In fact, I think I
Yeah.
met him when he's in Palo Alto.
Well, also, yes, correct. So
Um,
Roger, October 4th so agriculture tech is very India is a very important. A lot of people in Silicon Valley from my state, so they may be interested in coming there. I don't know, you're all sold out, but let's see, they can
Well,
go.
get on the wait list or send me a deck. Maybe you're just so interesting, we want you to pitch. But it's
Well,
going to be a full house. I will tell you that.
thank you so much, Roger. Thank you for coming and taking time for me. Actually, when you said that you're doing a continuous glucose monitoring, CGM, actually, I'm going to present a topic tomorrow about a story, a MedBricks presentation. Is a woman, a Jewish woman from 1930s. She is a movie actress. she's a Hollywood actress. She created this new technology that is enabled this CGM, continuous glucose monitoring.
Oh,
So please watch tomorrow. It's going to be
wow, I
fascinating.
will. I
Yeah,
think it's an amazing device. I mean, it's not just for I'm not diabetic. I just want to monitor my glucose. And when I see it start to go up, I have this walking treadmill under my desk. I'll stand up and I'll start walking, while I'm on calls and stuff until it goes, and I keep it exactly where I want it to be. So I'm not a doctor, but it was alarming seeing glucose spike. I'd have some sugar and it would spike, and it's like, holy cow! I've been doing that to myself my whole life.
So tell us a little bit about food as a medicine, Dr. Jelligam. Dr. Jelligam is a really expert in the food as a medicine. Ayurveda, he practices Ayurveda, he's a cardiologist, he practices Ayurveda, is a natural medicine. So Roger was exploring that areas a little bit in the past. So give us a little bit rundown on that one, quick rundown on that before I close the podcast.
Yeah, that's a great question to end. And Roger, as you know, it's like food is a powerful lobby, and food should be medicine, but not food should not be the one causing diseases. If you look at all the processed food, all the refined foods, that's the reason why you see the sugar spikes. If you eat the natural food and increase the activity is also as equivalent as eating to good food. If you have both of those in balance, most of the chronic diseases are gone. So that's where I'm trying to bring a more holistic approach in my practice here, saying that, hey, food should be a medicine. Exercise is a mandatory, but still you can't eat bad food and exercise. It's like a seesaw. You need to really balance it out. And it's again, AI is another thing which is coming big play into that.
Yeah, well, I'm with you 100% on that. Exercise, food, nutrition, sleep, stress, supplements. It's just all the stuff that I spent my life ignoring, that the last couple of years I've started to turn back to. Because what's the alternative? Pharmacology? I really don't want to go down that path.
Roger, that they can reach, they can buy your book. They can. I put your email address there, and Roger Royse at hensbooth.com. So that your official address, email address. If you Google Roger Royse, his name pops up all over the place. It's very popular.
Yeah, sometimes in ways I don't want it to. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Roger, coming there. And you always come to the. We wanted to update all the doctors. Once in a while, legal issues, tax issues to the doctors would be a great. You had a great addition to the podcast. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you for joining, Dr. Jelligam. It's an honor for me. Thank you. It's an honor, truly an honor.
Okay, thank you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you all.
Detailing their stories through our patented designs that can be worn on scrubs, t-shirts, printed on conference bags, and endless other promotional materials. Daily Wear for Medicine is the first ever of its kind to create curiosity in medicine through visual art. We at MedBricks are celebrating unsung heroes of the past who made enormous contributions to the field of medicine through our unique campaign called Daily Wear for Medicine. You can wear it, carry it, and give it.